Thanks for having me, Sandeep. Yeah, I currently had a security engagement for Prime Video, where I run a program that really works on advanced security controls for various parts of the business. Everything from infrastructure testing and availability around like DDoS bots and scraping, things like data classification and lineage, general like security engineering, AppSec, various kinds of control testing, really about supporting our developers in understanding how to scale security and understanding the controls in place and how they work. A large part of that is important because security people like to go do a bunch of security things. But if the users and consumers of that security, if it slows the business down, it's a distraction and a hindrance. But in general, prior to that, I've spent a lot of time in both financial services and the infrastructure space, probably north of 20 years at this point. Everything from, working on putting payroll systems from ADP on the internet, to large scale infrastructure projects like anti-DDoS with Arbor Networks and others. So I'm used to, I've done a lot of compliance work. I've done a lot of security control work. Pretty generalist across the board over the years.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you so much for sharing that. Hi, everyone. Sandeep here, co-founder and CEO at Defense. Mike, thank you so much for making time for this one. Fourth webinar that we're doing in the series of, how top tech tier companies essentially, operationalize security at scale. What are the unique challenges at scale, that we're going to discuss really. So looking forward to, a lot of questions from the audience as well. So thank you so much again for doing this, Mike.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So what we'll do is we'll basically jump right into it. And wherever possible, Mike, feel free to share use cases, real world sort of, situations that you faced. Really, it could be something as simpler as saying that, hey, why vulnerability management is different at my scale, really, right? We have the same tools, we have the same problems, we probably have the same objectives as well. We certainly do in most cases, but what are the harder security challenges at scale? How would we sort of, what would be your use case or two that you would want to talk about? Let's take vulnerability management maybe as a high level theme and sort of talk about how this is different at your scale.
Sure. I think vulnerability management's a really good example. When you have the sheer numbers of teams and peoples we have working on things, right? You're talking thousands of services, even more library and more lines of code. How do you keep visibility into that? It's not uncommon. Well, I would say it's not uncommon to find libraries that need to be updated or libraries that need to be out of date, but you need to be able to differentiate and prioritize libraries that are actually in the attack path versus things that are just in unit testing. And a lot of tooling, right? A lot of tooling isn't great at differentiating that. So you have to be able to understand those nuances and being able to build them into your pipeline, because the next time there's a regex vulnerability in a Selenium client, you can't spend, you don't want to be distracting teams to go clean up a bunch of unit tests with a high severity type scenario. So so that's like one good example of things being at scale. I think the other is at scale is you can either be, in general, right? You can be very deep or very wide. It's hard to bounce back and forth sometimes. And when you look in some of the worlds where think of the concepts of just delivering live video and everything that's required from that. You go from a stadium to intermediaries to back-end infrastructure to an edge network to millions of customers with a plethora of devices. It might be phones, it might be TVs, it might be Xboxes or PlayStations. There's a whole bunch of things where things can go wrong from both an availability perspective, from an integrity perspective in terms of maybe streams getting hijacked, and maintaining both the user both maintaining the user experience, protecting their data is it's all critical to execution at scale.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think as the old sort of adage goes, the more you scan, the more you find. In fact, just recently we had some calls, Mike, where we were told that, hey, in my cloud environments, every time we scan, we get 100,000 vulnerabilities. These are some of the largest insurance companies on planet, and that's the sort of number that we are seeing. And absolutely, at scale, even basic objectives and goals that you have, they get, I completely agree, they get super hard to fulfill just because of the sheer scale and a lack of prioritization, really, right? Mile wide versus mile deep, as you sort of you're mentioning earlier. So absolutely, and at your scale, I'm sure it's probably one of the largest scales anybody would have, in term, even amongst the the planet scale companies that we have. So
yeah. It's a lot of fun, and it's certainly something that attracted me to this. Is it's hard to find. It's hard to find companies of this scale, and I really thrive in these kinds of environments. You bring a great point up, right? And this was always the problem with a lot of I would say tool evolution over time, is that you turn a tool on, you get 1,000 vulnerabilities or 100,000 vulnerabilities on day one, and maybe you knock 5 of them off. Yeah. And then day 2, you get another 20,000. So now, like a week in, you end up in a scenario where you've got almost an unobtainable pile of things to resolve, but it doesn't necessarily it may or may not make you more secure. Like I think of when you think of security metrics and coverage, right? One of the things you often see is like, well, how many systems are coveraged, or how many systems have like endpoint on them, as an example. Or if I think of my infrastructure, like how many of my workloads are running my agent, and maybe the answer is 90%, or maybe the answer is 80%. Even if it's 99%, how do you know that you actually have the right 90 or 88 or 99% covered? If you miss the wrong things, you can really have a control failure, or a series of control failures that get you into a lot of trouble. So it's important to, at scale, also be able to understand the nuance of priority.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ultimately, when you're looking at such large numbers, 100,000 and then maybe more, every time you scan, you need a way to prioritize this better, right? And I think, Mike, that would be the next question.
Listen to the full webinar at deepfence.io/resources.